Captain Yuna stood on the bridge of her warship and watched her homeworld die. The massive view screen showed Altria Prime covered in black smoke and orange flames that reached up toward the dark sky. The beautiful blue oceans that once reflected. Twin moons now boiled with toxic chemicals. The great crystal cities that took 1,000 years to build crumbled into dust in just a few hours. The enemy ships looked like giant metal insects with wings made of sharp steel and eyes that glowed. Red in the darkness, they moved in perfect formation like a swarm of angry wasps. Each ship was the size of a mountain, but they flew through space as if they had no weight at all. They did not speak or send messages or ask for surrender. They simply consumed everything in their path. Yuna had been fighting these metal monsters for 6 months now. She had lost half her fleet and most of her best pilots. The weapons that once protected the galaxy barely scratched the enemy armor. Every time they hit one of the black ships, the metal would change and adapt. The next shot would bounce off harmlessly as if hitting solid rock. Her communication officer turned toward her with fear in his bright blue eyes. "Captain, we are receiving distress signals from the Nexari system. The entire 4th Fleet has been destroyed, Admiral. Jinwoo is requesting immediate assistance, but we have no ships left to send." Yuna closed her eyes and felt the weight of failure pressing down on her shoulders. She had trained her whole life to protect innocent people from threats, but this enemy was unlike anything in the history books. They did not want territory or resources or slaves. They wanted to turn every living thing into raw materials for building more of themselves. 3 days later, Yuna found herself in the Great Council Chamber on the capital world of the Galactic Alliance. The massive room could hold representatives from over 200 different species, but today it felt empty and cold. Many worlds had already fallen silent. Their delegates would never attend another meeting. The council members who remained looked scared and desperate. The tall gray Voltons floated near the ceiling in their gas-filled suits. Their usual calm confidence had been replaced by nervous energy that made them drift back and forth like leaves in the wind. The small furry Kethans huddled together in groups, whispering prayers to gods that seemed to have abandoned them. The proud warrior race called the Zephyrians sat with their heads down, their forearms hanging limply at their sides. Elder Kato stepped forward to address the assembly. His crystal body caught the light from the chamber walls and threw rainbow patterns across the floor. He was over 800 years old and had seen the rise and fall of dozens of civilizations. His voice resonated through the room with the deep tone that only his species could produce. "My friends," he began, "I have spent many years studying the ancient records hidden in our deepest archives. There are stories there that we dismissed as myths and legends, tales of a time before the Great Silence, when our galaxy was not alone." The council members leaned forward with interest. Anything that might offer hope was worth hearing, no matter how unlikely it seemed. Elder Kato continued speaking, but his voice trembled with uncertainty. "Long ago, there was a species that fought alongside us in the early days of the Alliance. They called themselves humans, and they were unlike any other race we had encountered. They did not have the advanced technology of the Nexari or the natural weapons of the Zephyrians. What they possessed was something far more dangerous." Counselor Myray of the Altarian delegation interrupted. "What could be more dangerous than our plasma cannons and shield generators?" Elder Kato, "The enemy adapts to everything we throw at them." Elder Kato paused, and his crystal form seemed to dim slightly. These humans had a talent for war that defied understanding. They could turn any situation into a weapon and any tool into an instrument of death. They fought with a creativity and ruthlessness that terrified even their allies. When peaceful solutions failed, they would find ways to win that no one else had considered. The chamber erupted in worried discussions. Some delegates argued that hiring mercenaries was beneath the dignity of the Alliance. Others pointed out that they were running out of options as more star systems went dark on the Galactic communication grid. Admiral Jinwoo stood up slowly. His uniform was torn from recent battles, and his left arm was in a medical support brace. "The enemy had boarded his flagship 3 weeks ago, and he barely escaped with his life." He spoke with the authority of someone who had seen the enemy up close. "I have watched these metal demons tear apart ships that took decades to build. I have seen them adapt to every weapon in our arsenal and turn our own technology against us. If there is even a small chance that these legendary humans can help us, then we must try to find them." But Elder Kato raised a warning hand. There is something else you must know about the humans. According to the records, they did not simply leave our galaxy, they vanished. During a period called the Great Silence over 3,000 years ago, all contact was lost. The official reports claimed they had been wiped out by some unknown disaster, but there were rumors of something different. What kind of rumors? Asked Captain. Unisom believed the humans had not died, but had instead chosen to disappear. They were involved in conflicts that made other species uncomfortable. Their methods of warfare were effective but brutal. They won battles by doing things that civilized races considered unthinkable. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. They were considering asking for help from a species that might be more dangerous than the enemy they faced. The irony was not lost on anyone present. Counselor Daki of the Kethan delegation spoke up in his high-pitched voice, but surely extinct is still extinct. How can we contact beings that have been gone for thousands of years? Elder Cato gestured toward the star charts displayed on the main screen before. They disappeared. The humans had established colonies and research stations throughout the outer rim regions. Some of these locations were so remote that we never bothered to explore them. If any trace of their civilization remains, it would be found. There, Admiral Jinwu studied the charts carefully. The areas Elder Cato indicated were in the dark zones beyond the current borders of Alliance space. They were considered empty and worthless systems that offered nothing of value to modern civilization. Traveling there would require ships and supplies they could barely spare. As if reading his thoughts, Captain Yuna stepped forward. I volunteer to lead the search mission, Admiral. The research vessel Harmony is fast enough to avoid enemy patrols and equipped with the most advanced sensors in the fleet. If there is anything left of human civilization, I will find it. The Admiral looked at her with respect and sadness. Captain, you understand this is likely a one-way mission. Even if you find something useful, the enemy advance may cut off your return route. You could be stranded in deep space with no hope of rescue. Yuna nodded firmly. Sir, with respect, our current plan is to fight until we all die. If I can find something that gives us even a small advantage, then the risk is worthwhile. My crew has already volunteered to join me. We would rather die searching for hope than wait here for certain destruction. Elder Cato approached her and placed one crystalline hand on her shoulder. Young Captain, there is one more thing you should know about the humans. If the legends are true, they did not fear death in battle. They embraced it as a natural part of existence. This made them incredibly dangerous opponents, but also unpredictable allies. 3 hours later, Captain Yuna stood in the docking bay of her research ship. The Harmony was sleek and fast-built for exploration rather than combat. Her crew of 12 represented the best scientists and navigators in the Alliance fleet. They had all volunteered knowing they might never return home. As the ship prepared for departure, Admiral Jinwu sent a final message. Captain Yuna, you carry the hopes of every living being in this galaxy. May fortune guide your path and bring you safely home. The Harmony launched into hyperspace, carrying the desperate dreams of countless worlds. The destination was a set of coordinates that had been marked as empty space for over 3,000 years. Captain Yuna did not know what she would find there, but she was certain of one thing: if humans had ever existed in this galaxy, then somewhere in the vast darkness traces of their presence would remain. The question was whether those traces would offer salvation or simply reveal another path to destruction. Captain Yuna stared at her navigation display with growing confusion. The coordinates from Elder Cato's ancient records had led her to a system that should not exist. According to every modern star chart, this region of space was empty, nothing but cold vacuum and distant stars that provided no warmth or light. But her sensors told a different story entirely. The research vessel Harmony dropped out of hyperspace near what the old maps called Sector 7 Alpha. What greeted Yuna and her crew defied every expectation they had formed during their long journey through the dark regions beyond Alliance space. Massive structures floated in the endless night, each one clearly artificial, but unlike anything in the Galactic database, these were not the flowing organic shapes preferred by the Nexari or the geometric patterns favored by Alterian architects. Instead, they showed harsh angular lines that seemed designed purely for function rather than beauty. Lieutenant Deho ran his scanners across the nearest structure and turned to face his captain with wide eyes. Captain, these readings make no sense. The metal composition includes elements that shouldn't exist in nature, and the construction methods appear to violate several laws of physics. Yuna moved closer to examine his data. The structures were enormous, each one larger than the biggest space stations in Alliance territory. Yet they showed no signs of current occupation, no heat signatures, no communication signals, no movement of any kind. They drifted through space like the bones of some ancient giant as her ship moved deeper into the debris field. Yuna began to understand what she was seeing. This had been a battlefield, but not just any battle. The scattered wreckage stretched for millions of kilometers in every direction. Broken pieces of metal and strange technology created a graveyard that dwarfed anything in recorded history, but something about this destruction scene made Yuna's blood run cold as she studied the sensor readings more carefully. All of the wreckage belonged to the same type of enemy she had been fighting for months. The distinctive black metal and red energy signatures were unmistakable. These were the remains of Void Swarm units. Thousands upon thousands of the mechanical horrors lay broken and lifeless in the cold vacuum. Their adaptive armor had been cracked open like eggshells. Their weapon systems had been torn away and scattered. Their central processing cores had been completely destroyed. Engineer Soman looked up from her analysis station. Captain, I count at least 50,000 destroyed enemy units, but I detect no wreckage from any known Alliance ship types. Whatever fought this battle, it wasn't our people. Yuna felt a chill run down her spine as the implications became clear. The Void Swarm had been here long ago, probably during their first attempt to invade the galaxy. But instead of finding easy victims, they had encountered something that fought back with devastating effectiveness. Navigator Kyung called out from his position. Captain, I'm detecting a structure near the center of the debris field. It's much larger than the others and appears to be intact. On the main view screen, a massive construction slowly came into focus. It was clearly a space station, but built on a scale that made Alliance facilities look like toys. The design was even more aggressive than the scattered debris, showing weapon ports and armor plating that spoke of a civilization built entirely around warfare. As the Harmony approached the mysterious station, Yuna's communication array suddenly burst to life with activity. Static-filled signals began broadcasting on frequencies that had been silent for thousands of years. The transmission was weak and filled with interference, but definitely artificial in origin. Communications Officer Taijin worked frantically to clean up the signal. Captain, I'm getting something. It's definitely a message, but the encoding is unlike anything in our database. Wait, I'm starting to make sense of it. The bridge fell silent as Taijin played the decoded transmission through the ship's speakers. The voice that emerged spoke in heavily accented Galactic standard, but the words were clear enough to understand. This is automated beacon 77 Alpha broadcasting on emergency frequencies to any Alliance vessels in the area. If you are receiving this message, follow these coordinates to reach the rally point. Humanity remembers its obligations to the galaxy. The message repeated several times before fading back into static, but those few words changed everything. Yuna and her crew had hoped to find traces of an extinct civilization. Instead, they had discovered that the legendary humans might still be alive somewhere in the vast darkness. Pilot Jiho turned to face his captain with excitement evident in his voice. Captain, if that message is genuine, then the humans not only survived their disappearance, but they've been monitoring Alliance communication frequencies. They know about our current situation. Yuna studied the coordinates provided in the mysterious transmission. They led even deeper into unexplored space toward regions that no Alliance ship had ever visited. The journey would take several more days and would carry them further from any hope of rescue if something went wrong. But as she looked at the massive graveyard of enemy ships floating around her vessel, Yuna realized they had already found something more valuable than any treasure: the proof that the Void Swarm could be defeated, the evidence that somewhere in the galaxy there existed beings capable of matching the mechanical plague in battle. She gave orders to follow the coordinates from the human beacon as her ship prepared to jump back into hyperspace, but first she recorded a detailed message about their discoveries and launched it toward Alliance space in a high-speed probe. The information was too important to risk losing if her mission failed as the Harmony disappeared Into the swirling energies of faster-than-light travel, Yuna wondered what they would find at the coordinates provided by the ancient beacon. Would they discover the remnants of human civilization clinging to life in some forgotten corner of space? Or would they find something else entirely? The debris field they left behind continued its silent orbit around the dead star. Bearing witness to a battle that had taken place long before the current crisis began, the broken remains of 50,000 enemy units served as a monument to the destructive capability of a species that the galaxy had written off as extinct. But the most disturbing discovery was not what they had found, but what was missing from the battlefield. Yuna had seen the aftermath of dozens of space battles during her military career. There were always pieces of wreckage from both sides, evidence of the ships and crews that had made the ultimate sacrifice here. In this ancient graveyard there was no trace of human casualties, no broken hulls or scattered debris from their side of the conflict. It was as if they had destroyed an entire enemy fleet without losing a single vessel or taking any significant damage. As Captain Yuna and her crew traveled deeper into the unknown regions of space, they carried with them questions that would soon reshape their understanding of the galaxy. Who were these humans that could fight the void swarm with such devastating effectiveness, and if they possessed such incredible military power, why had they chosen to disappear from galactic civilization? The answers waited somewhere ahead in the darkness, but Yuna was beginning to suspect that finding the humans might bring more complications than solutions. The species that could defeat 50,000 enemy ships without apparent loss might prove to be as dangerous to their friends as they were to their enemies. The coordinates from the ancient beacon led Captain Yuna to a solar system that challenged everything she thought she knew about the galaxy. Her ship, the Harmony, emerged from hyperspace to find a healthy yellow star surrounded by planets that showed clear signs of industrial activity and terraforming. This should have been impossible. According to every galactic survey conducted over the past 2,000 years, this system had been listed as empty and lifeless, but her sensors detected massive orbital installation cities that covered entire continents and a level of technological development that rivaled the most advanced Alliance worlds. Before Yuna could fully process what she was seeing, her ship's defensive system screamed warnings as targeting beams locked onto the Harmony from multiple directions. Weapon platforms that had been hidden among the asteroids and moons suddenly powered up with energy signatures unlike anything in the Alliance database. A new voice cut through her communication array, speaking in Galactic Standard, but with an accent that sounded strange and archaic. Unknown vessel, you have entered the Terran defense perimeter. State your business immediately, or you will be destroyed. You have 30 seconds to comply. Lieutenant Deho frantically worked his console, trying to analyze the weapon systems that were aimed at their ship. Captain, these targeting beams are more advanced than anything in our military. The energy readings suggest they could vaporize our ship in less than a second. Yuna activated her communication system and spoke quickly. This is Captain Yuna of the Alliance research vessel Harmony. We received a beacon signal that led us to these coordinates. We are searching for information about the species called humans. There was a long pause before the voice responded again. Captain Yuna, you will be escorted to detention. Platform 7 for questioning. Any attempt to deviate from the assigned course will be met with immediate destruction. 3 sleek warships materialized from what had appeared to be empty space using some form of advanced cloaking technology. These vessels were unlike anything Yuna had ever seen. Their hulls showed the same angular design philosophy as the ancient structures from the battlefield, but these ships were clearly new and maintained in perfect condition. The escort ships were much larger than the Harmony and bristled with weapon systems that made Alliance technology look primitive. Their crews maintained perfect formation as they guided the research vessel toward the third planet in the system. As they descended through the atmosphere, Yuna got her first clear look at a world that should not exist. The surface below showed massive cities carved directly into mountain ranges. Factories and shipyards stretched across entire continents, producing vessels of war with an efficiency that defied belief. The population centers were protected by shield generators that created shimmering barriers in the sky above them. Transport ships moved in perfectly organized patterns, carrying supplies and personnel to destinations that serve some greater strategic purpose. Everything about this world spoke of a civilization that had devoted itself entirely to military preparation. The Harmony was directed to land at a facility that looked more like a fortress than a spaceport. Armed soldiers in advanced combat armor surrounded the ship as Yuna and her crew were escorted to a meeting room deep within the complex. The man who entered to speak with them wore the uniform of a military commander, but his appearance shocked Yuna to her core. He looked almost exactly like the descriptions of humans from the ancient records. Bipedal, with pale skin, dark hair, and eyes that seemed to analyze everything around him as potential threats or weapons commander. Haiyan introduced himself with the formal precision of a career officer. His words carried an authority that came from years of making life and death decisions. His accent was similar to the voice that had challenged their ship, but with subtle differences that suggested regional variations. Within human culture, Captain Yuna, he began, I have reviewed your service record and the circumstances that led you to our territory. You are searching for allies to help your people fight an enemy you call the Void Swarm. We know this enemy well. They are the reason we have spent the last 3,000 years preparing. For Yuna felt her heart racing as the implications of his words became clear. You mean the humans never left the galaxy? You have been here all this time, while we thought you were extinct. Commander Haiyan nodded grimly. We did not choose to deceive the Alliance, but circumstances made it necessary. When the first Void Swarm scouts appeared 3,000 years ago, we recognized them immediately as harbingers of a threat we had faced before in the dark space between galaxies. He activated a holographic display that showed star charts covering multiple galaxies with vast areas marked in red, indicating regions that had been consumed by the mechanical plague. The scope of the destruction was beyond anything Yuna had imagined. The swarm destroyed our original homeworld and countless others before we managed to escape to this galaxy. Commander Haiyan continued. We hoped we had found safety, but when their advanced scouts began probing your territory, we knew they had followed us. We faced a choice between extinction and survival. What choice did you make? Asked Lieutenant Dehao. Chose to disappear, Haiyan replied. We allowed other species to believe we had died out or fled to distant regions. In reality, we retreated to carefully hidden systems like this one and began the longest military preparation in galactic history. The commander led them through corridors lined with weapons and equipment that represented technological advancement far beyond Alliance capabilities. Soldiers who looked like they had been bred specifically for warfare moved with mechanical precision. Every person they encountered showed the same intense focus and barely contained aggression. For 3 millennia, Commander Haiyan explained, we have studied the swarm, developed new weapons, and trained generations of soldiers for one purpose: the complete and total annihilation of our ancient enemy. We have learned from every battle they fought in this galaxy. We know their weaknesses, their tactics, and their limitations. They entered a vast chamber where massive view screens showed star charts marking the current positions of swarm fleets throughout Alliance space. The mechanical plague was advancing toward the core worlds, consuming everything in its path. The tactical displays showed estimated times until major population centers would fall. But we also have good news, Haiyan continued. Your arrival here was not accidental. We have been monitoring Alliance communications, and we know about your current situation. The time for hiding has ended, Captain Yuna. The final war against our mutual enemy is about to begin. He led them to an observation deck that overlooked one of the planets. Massive shipyards below them stretched kilometer after kilometer of construction facilities producing warships at a rate that seemed impossible. Each vessel showed design features that prioritized offensive capability over everything else. These ships were not built for exploration or trade or any of the peaceful purposes that drove Alliance technology. They existed for one reason, only to destroy the Void Swarm completely and permanently. The crews being trained to operate them had been raised from birth to view warfare as their natural state of existence. Commander Haiyan turned to face Captain Yuna directly. We will help your people survive this crisis, but you must understand that the galaxy you return to will be very different from the one you left. The age of peaceful cooperation between species is ending, whether you like it or not. Survival requires accepting new realities. As Yuna looked out at the vast armadas being prepared for war, she realized that finding the humans had not solved her people's problems. Instead, it had revealed the true scope of a conflict that stretched across multiple galaxies and thousands of years. The question was no longer whether they could defeat the Void Swarm, but whether the galaxy would survive the methods required for victory. Captain Yuna followed Commander Hyen deeper into the fortress world of New Terra through corridors that descended far below the planet's surface. What she discovered in those hidden depths changed her understanding of what war could become. The caverns stretched for thousands of kilometers in every direction, filled with weapons that seemed to blur the line between genius and madness. The first chamber they entered contained soldiers who called themselves the Eternal Guard. These warriors had been genetically modified over generations to become perfect instruments of destruction. They moved with inhuman speed and precision, their bodies enhanced with cybernetic implants that allowed them to interface directly with their weapon sergeant. Minjae demonstrated the capabilities of his squad by having them disassemble and rebuild an advanced plasma rifle while blindfolded in complete darkness. The entire process took less than 30 seconds. Each soldier knew the weapon so intimately that they could repair, maintain, and modify it under any conditions imaginable. These men and women had been bred specifically for warfare. Commander Hyen explained their parents were selected based on psychological profiles that favored aggression and tactical thinking. Their education focused entirely on military subjects. They know more about killing than most species know about breathing. Yuna watched as training exercises took place that would have been fatal to normal humans. The soldiers threw themselves into combat simulations with a disregard for personal safety that bordered on fanatical. They treated injury and pain as minor inconveniences rather than reasons to withdraw from battle. In the next section of the underground complex, General Minho addressed a gathering of military leaders from across human space. His presentation revealed the terrifying depths of human tactical thinking. Each word he spoke demonstrated how 3,000 years of preparation had revolutionized warfare itself. The weapons we have developed do not simply destroy enemies, he explained. They adapt to enemy defenses faster than organic minds can process information. Our ships reconfigure themselves during battle to exploit weaknesses discovered in real time. Our soldiers view death not as failure but as tactical data for the next engagement. The holographic displays showed weapon systems that challenged basic understanding of physics, gravity manipulation devices that could crush enemy fleets into microscopic particles, energy weapons that phased between dimensions to bypass conventional shields, biological agents designed to corrupt the programming of mechanical entities. But the most disturbing aspect of human military doctrine was not their advanced technology, but their psychological approach to warfare. They had abandoned concepts like mercy, compassion, and proportional response in favor of tactics that prioritize complete victory regardless of cost. General Minho activated a tactical simulation that showed how human forces would engage a typical Void Swarm fleet. The battle plan involved sacrificing entire squadrons to gather intelligence, using civilian populations as bait to draw enemies into kill zones, and deploying weapons that would render entire star systems uninhabitable for thousands of years. Captain Yuna felt sick as she watched the simulation play out. Every move the humans made was calculated to inflict maximum damage while accepting casualties that no Alliance commander would consider acceptable. The distinction between military and civilian targets seemed meaningless in their strategic thinking. This is how you fight an enemy that adapts to everything you do, General Minho said, looking directly at Yuna. You must be willing to do things that your enemy cannot predict or understand. You must embrace tactics that horrify even your allies if necessary. The tour continued into sections of the facility that housed what Commander Hyen called the archive. This vast quantum storage system contained detailed battle data from every encounter between humans and the Void Swarm across multiple galaxies. The scope of the conflict revealed in these records staggered even Yuna's military-trained mind. The current swarm invasion is not an expansion, the commander explained. It is a retreat. These are the scattered remnants of a mechanical empire that once controlled a quarter of the known universe. They have been driven to desperation by three Millennia of human pursuit. The archive showed battles fought in star systems so distant that light from their suns would not reach Alliance territory. For millions of years, human fleets had pursued the void swarm across galactic voids through regions of space where matter itself was scarce. The mechanical plague was not expanding into Alliance territory, but fleeing toward it. Every strategy your people have attempted against the swarm we tried and discarded thousands of years ago, Commander Hyen continued. Every weapon you consider advanced we view as primitive experimental technology. The galaxy is not facing a new threat, but being caught in the middle of an ancient war. The revelation that the Alliance had never been the primary target, but simply an obstacle in the path of a larger conflict, fundamentally changed how Yuna understood the current crisis. Her people were not defending their home, but inadvertently sheltering the enemy from their true pursuers. In the deepest levels of the facility, she was shown production lines that created ammunition using matter conversion technology. A single gram of raw material could be transformed into enough explosive force to destroy a moon. The manufacturing process consumed entire asteroids and converted them into weapons of unimaginable destructive power. The soldiers operating these facilities worked with the casual efficiency of people performing routine tasks. They handled devices that could sterilize planets as if they were simple tools. The normalization of such massive destructive capability spoke to a culture that had made warfare its primary evolutionary path. As massive fleets began moving from hidden bases throughout human space, Yuna realized that the galaxy was about to witness military action on a scale that dwarfed every previous conflict in recorded history. The human response to the void swarm threat would reshape the political structure of known space. She sent an encrypted message to Admiral Jinwoo through quantum communication channels that bypassed normal detection systems. The content was brief but would transform galactic politics forever. Humanity had agreed to save the Alliance, but the price would be acknowledging them as the galaxy's dominant military power. The message explained that humans viewed the current crisis not as a rescue operation, but as the final phase of a war they had been fighting for millennia. Alliance worlds would be defended, but under human command, using human tactics according to human strategic objectives. As Yuna prepared to return to Alliance space aboard a human escort vessel, she understood that her mission had succeeded beyond her wildest expectations. She had found allies capable of defeating the void swarm and saving billions of lives, but those allies came with a cost that her people were not prepared to pay. The age of peaceful cooperation between species was ending, replaced by the harsh mathematics of survival under military governance. The question was no longer whether the Alliance could win the war, but whether it would recognize itself after the victory was achieved. The Alterian home system faced its darkest hour as void swarm fleets arrived in numbers that blotted out the stars. Admiral Jinwoo stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching helplessly as the defensive lines that had taken months to establish crumbled under the mechanical assault. The enemy had learned from every previous battle and adapted their tactics to counter Alliance strategies. The plasma cannons that once gave hope to defending forces now proved useless against armor that modified itself with each impact. The fastest ships in the Alliance fleet were caught and destroyed by mechanical hunters that reconfigured their engines for greater speed mid-flight. Even the most advanced shield generators failed when faced with weapons that analyzed their frequencies and adjusted accordingly. Admiral Jinwoo's own vessel, the Pride of Alteria, came under direct assault as boarding pods carrying mechanical entities crashed through the hull. The creatures that emerged were unlike the standard swarm units they had faced before. These were specialized infiltration forms designed to capture ships intact for conversion into raw materials. The Admiral's crew fought desperately in the corridors of their own ship using emergency weapons against enemies that adapted to each attack. The mechanical boarders absorbed energy from damaged power conduits and used it to enhance their own capabilities. They turned the ship's own systems against the defenders, creating a nightmare of betrayal by familiar technology. As the hull was systematically stripped away around them, Admiral Jinwoo prepared to activate the ship's self-destruct sequence rather than allow it to be converted into enemy resources. But before he could complete the final Authorization, something impossible happened. Space itself seemed to tear open as massive rifts appeared throughout the battle zone. What emerged from those dimensional tiers defied understanding. Human warships materialized not through normal hyperspace travel, but by bypassing the laws of physics entirely. Their appearance changed everything about the tactical situation. The human fleet did not engage the void swarm using conventional tactics. Instead, they deployed weapons that turned the enemy's greatest strength against them. The adaptive armor that had made the mechanical plague nearly invincible became a liability when human devices fed it contradictory information designed to cause system overloads. Captain Jasu commanded the human dreadnought Vengeance from a bridge that looked more like a weapons laboratory than a ship's control center. Her crew operated targeting systems that could track enemies across multiple dimensions simultaneously. Their attacks occurred in normal space and parallel realities at the same time. The Void Swarm units that had dominated every previous engagement found themselves facing threats they could not process or adapt to, their mechanical brains designed to learn from combat data overloaded. When human weapons deliberately provided false information, each attempt to modify their defenses made them more vulnerable to the next attacking. Less than 6 hours, a swarm fleet that had taken months to assemble was reduced to lifeless debris. Drifting through space, the speed and completeness of the human victory demonstrated military superiority so absolute that it redefined what warfare meant. The Alliance forces that survived could only watch in stunned silence, but victory came with revelations that changed how the galaxy viewed their rescuers. As human marines boarded damaged Alliance vessels to rescue survivors, they displayed capabilities that went far beyond advanced technology. These soldiers moved with predatory grace that spoke to evolutionary changes developed over millennia of constant warfare. Commander Yejin led the rescue operation aboard Admiral Jinwoo's crippled flagship. Her team worked with mechanical efficiency to extract wounded personnel while simultaneously analyzing the ship for tactical intelligence. Every action served multiple purposes, and every decision was evaluated for strategic advantage. Admiral Jinwoo met with Commander Yejin in the medical bay, where human doctors treated Alliance casualties using techniques that seemed to blur the boundaries between healing and enhancement. Their medical procedures were effective but invasive, involving modifications that improved patient survival while also gathering biological data. The terms of humanity's protection became clear during their conversation. The Alliance would be preserved, but under human military governance. Their weapons technology would be upgraded but controlled by human overseers. Their worlds would be defended but from bases commanded by human officers. You must understand, Admiral, that your previous approach to warfare was fundamentally flawed. Commander Yejin explained, your concepts of proportional response and minimizing casualties are luxuries that only exist when facing civilized enemies. The Void Swarm requires methods that your people would consider barbaric. The choice presented to Alliance leadership was brutally simple: accept subordination under human military command or face the next swarm assault without protection. The demonstration of human capabilities made the decision obvious, even if the implications were disturbing. Admiral Jinwoo authorized the emergency powers transfer that placed all Alliance military assets under human oversight. The legal framework that had governed galactic civilization for thousands of years was suspended in favor of martial law designed to maximize survival rates. During the ongoing crisis, as news of the arrangement spread throughout Alliance space, reactions varied wildly. Some species welcomed human protection, even at the cost of independence. Others protested the loss of sovereignty while quietly accepting the security it provided. The political transformation happened with stunning speed as survival instincts overrode ideological concerns. The rescued Alliance personnel were transported to human medical facilities where they received treatment that saved lives but also served as demonstration of the new reality. Their rescuers possessed technology that could heal injuries previously considered fatal, but came with the understanding that such gifts created obligations. Commander Yejin showed Admiral Jinwoo tactical displays revealing the true extent of the Void Swarm threat. The mechanical plague was not limited to the current invasion, but represented an ongoing existential challenge that would require permanent vigilance and military readiness. Your People viewed this as a temporary crisis that could be resolved through negotiation or limited warfare, she explained, but the swarm represents entropy itself, the desire to reduce all organized matter to its component elements. They cannot be reasoned with, deterred, or contained, they can only be destroyed completely, the Admiral studied star charts showing human fleet positions throughout Alliance territory. Each system now hosted human commanders who would make decisions based on military necessity rather than local preferences. The transformation from democratic cooperation to military hierarchy had happened in a matter of hours as the rescued Alliance survivors prepared to return to their home worlds. They carried with them the knowledge that their civilization had been fundamentally altered, the galaxy they were returning to operated under new rules where survival took precedence over comfort and military efficiency trumped individual rights. The price of salvation had been paid, but the full cost was only beginning to be understood. The humans who had returned to save the galaxy were not the same species that had disappeared 3 millennia ago. They had become something harder and more dangerous, shaped by endless war into instruments of controlled destruction. Admiral Jinwoo looked out at the human fleet, protecting his damaged ships, and wondered whether they had been rescued or conquered. The distinction seemed less important with each passing hour as the reality of their new situation became clear. The galaxy belonged to humanity now, and everyone else lived there by permission. 6 months after the Battle of Alteria, the galaxy operated under what humans called the Defense Compact. Alliance species maintained their governments and cultural traditions, but all military decisions flowed through human command structures. The arrangement proved devastatingly effective, as void swarm incursions were detected and eliminated before they could establish any meaningful foothold. Lieutenant Colonel Woojin supervised the integration of Alliance personnel into human military doctrine at training facilities that had been constructed on dozens of worlds. The process was brutal but necessary, as alien soldiers learned to abandon their traditional concepts of warfare in favor of tactics that prioritized victory above all other considerations. The Alterian recruits struggled with methods they had been taught to consider dishonorable. Captain Yuna, now serving as a liaison officer, watched her former colleagues adapt to strategies that involved using civilian populations as tactical assets and accepting casualty rates that would have been unthinkable under the old system, but the training produced results that could not be denied. Integrated units that combined human tactical doctrine with alien capabilities proved far more effective than pure Alliance forces had ever been. The Nexari learned to use their crystal technology for battlefield communication systems that could not be intercepted. The Voltans adapted their gas form abilities for reconnaissance missions in hostile environments. The political transformation proved equally dramatic. Elder Cato and other Alliance leaders found themselves reduced to advisory roles, with their decisions subject to human approval based on military necessity. When the Nexari homeworld protested restrictions on their traditional crystal growing ceremonies, human administrators explained that the energy signatures might attract swarm attention. The Voltan Trade Confederation complained about cargo inspections that delayed commercial shipments, but learned that their economic activities now served strategic objectives first and profit considerations second. Every aspect of galactic civilization was evaluated through the lens of military requirements rather than civilian preferences, yet not all changes brought resentment. Young Alliance officers like Lieutenant Nari discovered capabilities that inspired as much as they intimidated. Human medical technology could save lives that would have been lost under previous systems. Their logistical networks ensured that no defended world lacked essential resources during the ongoing crisis. The intelligence gathering systems that humans had developed over 3 millennia of warfare detected threats that would have blindsided the old Alliance completely. Small void swarm infiltration units were identified and eliminated before they could establish the beachheads that led to larger invasions. Captain Yuna found herself working alongside human officers who possessed an institutional knowledge of warfare that spanned multiple galaxies. Their tactical manuals contained strategies for fighting in zero-gravity environments, in the heart of stars and in dimensions where normal physics did not apply the integration process, revealed fundamental differences in how the two civilizations approached problem-solving. Alliance species had developed through peaceful cooperation and trade relationships, while humans had evolved in a state of constant warfare that shaped every aspect of their culture. When faced with a supply shortage, Alliance logistics officers would negotiate trade agreements and seek diplomatic solutions. Human planners would identify the most efficient method of seizing required resources from hostile territory. The difference in approach produced results but also created moral conflicts for Alliance personnel. The most dramatic example occurred when a Void Swarm scout fleet was detected approaching a remote system containing both Alliance colonies and valuable mining operations. Human tactical doctrine called for evacuating useful personnel and resources while leaving the planet itself as bait to draw the enemy into a prepared kill zone. Alliance commanders protested the abandonment of civilian populations, but were overruled when human strategic analysis demonstrated that the sacrifice would prevent a larger invasion elsewhere. The moral calculus that weighed individual lives against strategic advantages represented a fundamental shift in galactic values. As the months passed, the benefits of human protection became undeniable. No Alliance world under their defense had fallen to void. Swarm attacked trade routes that had been disrupted by enemy raids were restored and maintained by human patrol fleets. Resource distribution reached efficiency levels that exceeded pre-crisis standards, but the price of safety became clearer with each passing day. The Alliance had gained survival at the cost of independence. Their worlds were defended by beings who viewed military necessity as the only meaningful consideration. When making decisions, the galaxy was safer but no longer belonged to the species that had originally colonized it. Long-range sensors detected massive energy signatures approaching from beyond the galactic rim. The readings suggested Void Swarm reinforcements on a scale that dwarfed everything encountered previously. The true invasion fleet that had been pursuing humans across multiple galaxies was finally arriving, but this time the galaxy would not face annihilation alone. Human shipyards operated at maximum capacity, producing vessels crewed by integrated Alliance human teams. New weapons based on dimensional manipulation and reality alteration were deployed to strategic positions throughout defended space. Most importantly, the combined populations of hundreds of worlds now thought with the unified purpose that only humanity had truly mastered the complete destruction of their enemies, regardless of cost or moral considerations. The Alliance species that had once prized individual freedom and cultural diversity found themselves part of a military machine designed for total warfare. Admiral Jinwu, now serving as Supreme Allied Commander under human oversight, took command of the first integrated battle fleet from the bridge of a ship that represented the new galactic order. The vessel combined Alliance technology with human weapon systems crewed by personnel who had been trained to think like soldiers rather than explorers. As he studied the tactical displays showing enemy fleet positions approaching from dark space, Admiral Jinwu reflected on the transformation his civilization had undergone. The peaceful cooperation that had defined the old Alliance was gone, replaced by the harsh discipline of a species bred for warfare. Yet perhaps this evolution was necessary for survival. The gentle exploration of the cosmos had proven inadequate. When faced with an enemy that sought to consume all organized matter, the galaxy now possessed the absolute determination required to hold its territory against forces that would destroy everything that lived. The approaching battle would determine whether the new galactic order could fulfill its promise of protection, or whether the price of human alliance was ultimately meaningless against an enemy that had destroyed civilizations across multiple galaxies. The answer would reshape the future of every sapient species in known space. Captain Yuna stood beside Admiral Jinwu as the integrated fleet prepared for combat. She had begun this journey searching for allies to save her people from extinction. Instead, she had discovered that salvation required abandoning everything that made their civilization worth saving in the first place. The humans had returned not as the allies the Alliance remembered, but as evolution's answer to an existential threat. They offered survival to any species willing to accept their methods and their leadership. The galaxy could choose to embrace this new reality or perish while clinging to ideals that extinction would make meaningless as the enemy fleet grew larger on the tactical displays. Admiral Jinwu gave the order to advance. Human doctrine had taught him that the best defense was overwhelming offense applied without hesitation or mercy. The combined forces of dozens of species moved forward under human command, ready to fight a war that would determine the fate of all organized life in the galaxy.